I'm on the floor of the Bombay Stock Exchange, looking down on a scene of pandemonium. There must be about 2,000 traders in front of me, all excitedly holding pads of paper, shouting, gesticulating, in some cases coming very near to hitting each other. But whatever you can say about the Bombay Stock Exchange, there's no sign of a lack of business confidence.
If I were a foreign investor, knowing as I do the working of the democratic system in the country, I will know no cause for any apprehension whatsoever for investing.
M.R. Meyer is the head of the Bombay Stock Exchange, the most exuberant aspect of the opening up of the Indian economy. And he's a great champion of India's commercial capital.
Come to Bombay and invest. Here is a flourishing city. Here is a great financial center of the future. A center which will become one of the best, if not the best, between Tokyo in the east and London in the west.
Bombay has been tarnished by India's biggest financial scandal. It's been racked by bomb explosions and Hindu-Muslim violence. But the business community seems to have taken all that in its stride. Bombay is blossoming under the economic reform programme of India's Prime Minister, P.V. Narasimha Rao. Raghunandan Dar is a Bombay-based journalist with the Indian Express.
Now that Narasimha Rao government has liberalized, you have come into a scenario where we have been given the full flow of our thinking, our capabilities, and I think this is a chance where the foot is on the accelerator. We have to understand the psyche of an Indian here in Bombay. He has come here essentially to earn money. He's a migrant and he wants to earn. It's like an American thing. You know, you are in a cauldron, boiling cauldron of cultures, and that is what matters here. We want to earn money, go back home. And you feel sort of suffocated if you don't go to office for half a day. People would like to work even on a Sunday if they had a choice.
India is not always associated with entrepreneurial spirit, and it has to be said, Bombay is a bit of an exception. But Mr. Narasimha Rao's economic reforms, even if forced on the government by the International Monetary Fund and a looming debt crisis, have made an enormous impact in just 2 years. The bureaucratic restraints on the economy are slowly disappearing. And the Prime Minister, speaking on the BBC World Service earlier this year, insisted there was the political will to see the process through.
Earlier, there used to be so many forms to be filled, so many offices to be visited, so many people to meet and all that. All that is a thing of the past now. It is only at one place that all clearances are given. It is almost automatic. We are on the right track. This is irreversible. We want to liberalize, and the liberalization program has hailed by all countries of the world, all industrialists of the world, all economists of the world, and I should not really think that there will be any further difficulty. If there is, we are prepared to remove it.
India's image is of a poor country unable to pay its own way, and the majority of Indians, eking out a living in villages or urban slums, have gained nothing so far from the economic reforms. But India's propertied classes have a lot of money to spend. Dr. Agarwal, former head of the Kanpur Stock Exchange, says if India can't afford to ignore the rest of the world, neither can international commerce afford to ignore India.
It's a country which has a very large population, with a very large middle class who have immense purchasing power. So it's a great market. It was a country which was closed to all international business. But then the self-reliant policy doesn't work. There is no way that you can close your country. You'll have to open it up.
But how far has the process of liberalisation reached? Is India now an open economy? Sucheta Dalal of the Times of India is one of the country's leading business journalists.
No, I wouldn't say it's an open economy, unfortunately, because I think a lot of policy decisions that are taken at Delhi don't percolate down to the clerical levels where things have to move, forms have to be given. There is a lot of red tape, and I think it irritates a lot of foreign investors. And we seem to think the very fact that we're letting them come into India is a bonus, and people don't look at us that way.
India is competing for foreign investment with the economies of Southeast Asia and Latin America. The consensus among Western industrialists is that India has taken some brave steps, but needs to be bolder still. Howard Davis, head of the Confederation of British Industry, was one of several prominent industrialists who accompanied the British Prime Minister to India earlier this year.
I think there are two things. First, the rules and regulations that apply, and second, the spirit with which they are implemented in India. And certainly on the former, in terms of the government's policy, we are seeing some moves. We're seeing some changes in rules on dividend remittance, on tariffs, on convertibility of the rupee, etc. But there is still further to go. There are still a number of protected areas, and there are still some restrictions, effectively, on imports of machinery which ought to be removed. And there is also, of course, a related problem of the nature of the Indian bureaucracy. I mean, it's fine to talk in Delhi about a single window approach for approvals, but in practice it's very hard to find the right window, and usually it turns out to lead to a number of other windows through which you also need to pass. So I think that it would be wrong to give you the impression that British business thought that all was well in India. I think many British businesses still find India a frustrating place within which to work, an exciting and ultimately rewarding place, but nonetheless a frustrating environment.
And this sentiment that the Permit Raj still survives is shared by prominent non-resident Indian entrepreneurs such as GP Hinduja.
You see, all the policies are being formed at the center, whereas the projects are being implemented in the states. Most of the time is still going away between center and state, state and center. And again, in the bureaucracy, the senior bureaucrats who are committed to the liberalization program, they want things to happen. But unfortunately, when they start moving down or on different tables, it doesn't work.
But the goal of an open economy is not one all Indian politicians cherish. Some industries, which have grown up under the old protectionist system, can't cope with foreign competition. Tens of thousands of jobs are at stake. George Fernandez is a leader of the opposition Janata Dal. He says the government's economic policy ignores the plight of 4/5 of Indians for whom survival is a struggle.
This population of 80%, bulk of it in the rural areas, and those who are in the urban areas living either in shanty towns or on pavements, these are people whose concerns are my concerns. And the new economic policy cannot and will not touch their lives. The new economic policy, by its very definition of getting globalized, of taking the country's economy to the global market and getting the global market or the global production forces into my country, is ultimately concerned with the comforts of 3% of India's elite and the hangers-on together who would make perhaps another 7 or 8%, and whose percolation effect may touch the lives of maybe another 5 or 10%. So if that is new economic policy, then I have nothing to do with it, and it's not going to affect in any positive way the lives of the ordinary people of my country, particularly the poor of my country.
As Industry Minister in the late 70s, George Fernandez practiced what he preached. He was the man who chucked out IBM and Coca-Cola. IBM returned to India last year. It's now based in the southern city of Bangalore, and the head of IBM in India, Michael Klein, says the company has been made to feel welcome.
No, you find a very open attitude from the federal government, from the State Bank, the Reserve Bank, the Department of Electronics, down to the local government in Karnataka. They are very receptive to multinationals. They're very helpful. They have made available power, telephone, land, maybe not any of it up to Western expectations in its reliability or serviceability at this point, but you can also see continuing improvement in that. The duties continue to come down, which I think will open up India to the Western world. It'll make it easier for multinationals to operate here, and there's a pent-up demand for Western quality products, for Western quality services. Would I recommend that people come here? Absolutely.
And other multinationals are coming back. I'm now in Wimpy's fast food restaurant in Connaught Place in the centre of Delhi, where hamburgers cost 14 rupees each, a maxi burger is 27 rupees, chicken in a bun 32 rupees, chips just 9 rupees. Coca-Cola is set to return here soon as well, but these are just the sort of multinationals which George Fernandez says should have no place in the Indian economy.
Not in those areas where we don't need them. We don't need them to bottle water and market it here. We don't need them to produce soft drinks and market them here. We don't need them to produce tomato ketchup and potato chips. We don't need them to produce baby milk powder and what have you. I have not opposed multinationals which are involved in high-tech areas coming into the country, if possible on terms that are acceptable to us. So the idea that there has been a blanket opposition on my part to any multinational coming into the country is not correct.
Left-of-centre politicians are adamant, though, that there's no place for multinationals in the biggest and most sensitive sector of the economy, agriculture. And sometimes the resistance to the big conglomerates spills over into violence. Recently, a Cargill seeds office in southern India was ransacked by local farmers. They were complaining that multinationals marketing hybrid seeds could make Indian agriculture dependent on the West. That incident prompted Baldev Lal, co-chairman of the American Business Council in Delhi, which represents US-based businesses operating in India, to warn of the potential damage to India's economy.
The message is that this sends the wrong signals to not only current but also potential US investors. Why US investors? I would say any foreign investor. And if incidents like this are repeated in Karnataka and in some other parts of the country, I should think it would deter foreign investment in India.
If India is still a difficult place to do business, the speed of the reforms has astounded and in some cases alarmed observers. But is this conversion to the free market skin deep, or has the process of economic liberalisation become embedded in the way Indians think and operate? Michael Klein of IBM.
Well, I don't know about embedded in the culture, but I think it's irreversible. I think the benefits that the populace in general see out of the policy, out of the influx of foreign money, is something they won't turn their back on again, because life is getting better in India. There are new standards. You know, I think some of the Marathi car, for instance, is an excellent example. It is a high-quality product, and it's going to set a new standard. The liberalization with the airlines, the coming of the air taxis, has set a new level of quality that people never saw before. They're not going to want to go back.
And Sucheta Dalal of the Times of India agrees that although some aspects of the liberalisation process have still a long way to go, there's no turning the clock back.
They're deliberately slow in certain areas like banking and financial services, where they don't exactly want people rushing in so fast. But most of the decisions they've taken are irreversible. They just have to get used to this new idea of not going in for permissions. But I think they're coming to terms with it. It's irreversible. It's not as if anyone's talking about going back to controls or going back to formula-based pricing or anything.
That word, irreversible, is used time and again by those talking about India's economic reforms. But the test of the liberalisation process will be whether it delivers a measure more prosperity, not just to India's urban middle class, but to India's masses as well.